In this video, we'll build a complete Stripe payment system for your SaaS using Claude Code, subscription plans, checkout flow, and customer portal integration that handles plan switching and cancellations automatically. I'll show you how to use MCPs for Supabase, Stripe, and Playwright so that Claude can build your database, Stripe products, and test everything automatically. Plus, I'll navigate real coding issues that come up so that you can too. And if you haven't seen the previous videos where I build out the core framework, user authentication, and navigation, check those out too. All right, so I have the SaaS framework that I've been building out here running locally on my computer so I can test everything. First, I'm going to install some specialized agents and MCPs into Claude Code. Then I'm going to go over the prompt for the project and then we'll get started. I'm going to open up a new terminal and I'm going to jump into the Vibe Encoder's SaaS Accelerator framework. And I'm going to run Claude Code from here so that I can install the new agents. I'm going to do /agents. And now from here, we can create a new agent. I'm going to create two agents, one to build out the product itself, and then another one that handles Stripe. We'll go ahead and create the agent within Claude. And now what we want to do is just describe the agent that we need. Expert next.js TypeScript developer with deep knowledge of Supabase and next.js best practices and next.js community best practices. So we'll go ahead and hit enter, and then it's going to go ahead and generate a custom agent that is familiar with Next.js and understands all of the community best practices. And then from here, you can tell it what tools it has access to. I'll go ahead and just say continue, and we'll go ahead and use Sonnet. And we'll just allow it to pick its own color. So here we have our new agent, and I always recommend that you go over it and add anything that you feel is important. First, you have the description which tells Claude Code when to use this agent. And then we've got the system prompt down here. So we'll go ahead and hit enter. And then if you ever want to take a look at that agent again, you can just jump in there, view the agent, and you can see all of the details related to that agent that you created. And this looks good. So now we're going to go back and we're going to create one more agent, project agent. We'll create it with Claude Code. This time we're going to create a expert Stripe payment engineer with specific knowledge of Next.js and TypeScript and Supabase authentication. Now I'm still playing around with these agents. You might have been able to just create one that had all three. I've been playing around with specializations and whether it's better to have more specialized agents or have fewer with all of the skills they need. We'll go ahead and give it access to all of the tools and pick the color, and we'll go ahead and hit save. And so now we've got these two agents. Looks good. So next up, I'm going to install some important MCPs for our project. First, I'm going to install the MCP for Supabase. And what this will allow us to do is allow Claude Code to do all of the work in Supabase without us having to do it. So now we need our Supabase key and the project name. Going to jump into Supabase, pick our SaaS framework project, jump up here to account preferences, then over to access tokens. Then I'll generate a new token, temp YouTube demo, expires in 1 day, generate the token. And then we have our token right here. We can copy it, jump back over to Claude Code, and you can copy the command just as I have it, and I'll drop in the key here. Then I'll get the project ID, copied, reposition this so you can see, drop that here. All right, now if we jump into Claude /MCP, Supabase is connected, perfect. We'll jump back to the terminal. I'm going to install this one next just because it's easy. It's Playwright. This will allow Claude Code to automatically launch a browser and test our code visually. Let's add that one. Now the final one we need to add is for Stripe. So for this, I'm going to come to Stripe and I'm going to have to create a new account. We'll create a separate account. We'll call this our SaaS framework demo. Create. Now I can't remember if we need a sandbox or the live account. I think we can go to the live account and just turn it into test mode. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to switch to the sandbox. It looks like I should have done that from the beginning. And we'll turn on test mode. There we go. Then I'm going to jump over to developers, API keys. Then I'm going to jump back to Notion. I'm going to grab the Stripe MCP, jump back to Claude Code. We'll drop that here. Go back to Stripe, grab the secret key, copied. And you can copy this just as I have it here. Paste that right there. Add the MCP. Now if I jump into Claude Code, MCP, we have Playwright, Stripe, and Supabase connected. And we've got our two agents, so we're good to go. All right, so now we're ready to run this prompt here, which is going to integrate Stripe into this SaaS framework. If you're interested in getting access to the SaaS framework, make sure to jump into the Vibe Encoders community. I'm going to take this prompt and drop it into VS Code here. I'm inside the Vibe Encoders SaaS Accelerator framework. I'm going to open up Claude Code. Just going to double check the MCPs that we set up are there. There they are. And our agents. ready to go. Now I will share this entire conversation so that you can see how I built out this prompt. But I built this because even though I can go into plan mode in Claude Code here and we can build a plan, depending on the project, I like to think things through a bit in Claude as well and have it build a prompt that I can use in Claude Code. And I created this little diagram here to help explain how I create these prompts. So first and foremost, I always tell Claude and Claude Code to keep things simple as I describe what I'm trying to do. That's the most important thing, so that it knows to do that. Sometimes it will create more complex plans than are needed. I also tell it to make sure it's using best practices from the community itself and to also use search documentation. So when you actually build these prompts, I want it to do a web search and look up these different things. So instead of just saying use best practices from the community, I say actually search and look for these things. I also tell it what MCPs it's going to have available to it so that it knows that. I also ask it to tell me if it has any questions so that I can provide those specific answers. And then I also tell it to give me instructions. It's going to have access to the MCPs. So it's going to be able to go into Stripe, into Supabase. It's going to be able to create databases, those types of things. But there are some things that it's not going to be able to do. I want those additional instructions so that I can just quickly walk through and do the things that I need to do. And so if you scroll back all the way to the top using the link that I provided in the description below, you'll see that entire conversation that leads to this final prompt that I'm going to come here and copy. And then real quick, you can see that we told it what MCPs it has, the tech stack, the subscription setup, the database requirements for Supabase, the Stripe configuration, the testing requirements, the core features, the user flow, the environment variables that we'll need, and then the instructions that we came up with through our discussion that I outlined here. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to like and subscribe. It tells me what type of content you want more of. So now I'll jump back into Visual Studio, go over to Claude Code. I'm going to go into plan mode by hitting Shift Tab twice. So now I'm in plan mode. I'll go ahead and paste in the prompt that I created in Claude. Please review these plans. Let me know if you have any questions. And then from here, I'm going to dictate into Claude Code using a tool called Whisperflow. Please look at the plans here and then let me know if you have any questions, and then go ahead and prepare a step-by-step plan that we can walk through to implement Stripe payments into this SaaS framework. So here we have our prompt that we built in Claude and then our instructions, and now it's going through and it's just investigating first the MCP capabilities for Supabase. We'll go ahead and give it permission to access Supabase and then also Stripe. So it wants to do a bit of research. We'll go ahead and just say, yes, you can do that. And you don't need to ask next time. All right, so here's the analysis of our MCPs and how they can help in this process, which was one of the things that I outlined in this prompt, which was the MCPs that it had access to and to analyze the capabilities so that it knew what it could do on its own and what it needed to tell me to do. All right, so here's our plan. Phase 1, MCP automated setup and configuration, Stripe products and price creation. So it's going to go ahead and create the products inside of Stripe for me. It's going to create the database that stores all of our different products. It's going to update the env variable. These are some of the new routes that it wants to create. I'm going to ask a quick question on that. I just want to make sure that it's using as much of the integrated Stripe processing as possible. It's going to build out our subscriptions page, and then it's going to do some testing, some production readiness. And here's why it's good to make sure you read the plans, because it's going to do some stuff that we didn't actually have it do. It might be good to do that, but we didn't discuss that. So I'm going to tell it to make sure not to move forward with phase 4. And I want to just confirm here that it's using as much built-in functionality from Stripe as possible. So before we move on, I'm just going to come over here. In phase 2, I wanted to make sure that you're using as much of the built-in Stripe integration as possible in terms of checkout pages and also being able to manage your subscription. That should be done as much as possible on the Stripe side instead of trying to implement things into our app. Our app should be using the most simple Stripe integration possible. Let's go ahead and leave phase 4 out for now, unless there's something that we need there for actually testing this implementation. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. So it looks like it might be revising the plans based off of my feedback. This was something that I did have in the prompt. So it's always good to just double check. There's no need to rush. It looks like it changed the routes here. Personally, just in terms of consistency, I like checkout and portal better. So I'm just going to copy what it had here. Can we use these endpoint names instead? And then it looks like it took off phase 4. So we'll just make that quick update. All right, there we go. So what it does simplify here is all of the things that we're building out. And just so you know, I know to use the hosted Stripe checkout only because I did research. I'm not a Stripe payment expert. All I did was before in this process, I used Claude here to just learn a bit about the best practices for building the most simple setup. And it told me about these different features, and that's why I'm using them. All right, so that's probably as good as we'll get it. Let's go ahead and move forward. I'm going to go ahead and give it permission to execute these different MCP commands. It's got to create the price and the products. All right, so it started to add some things and then noticed that it needs to create reoccurring prices for subscriptions. And I'm noticing here it's not using the MCP. I'm not exactly sure why it's calling the API directly. I'll go ahead and let it proceed. I'm going to break out and say, it looks like you didn't have the right key. Any reason you're not using the MCP? Did the MCP not have that capability? Is that why you're using the API directly? I'm going to turn off auto accept off just for a moment while we figure this out. And then if it needs to use the API directly, I'll just give it the key. So basically it's just noticing that the MCP doesn't have the ability to do it. All right, so it's moving on here, which I don't want it to do. So this is where you kind of have to stay aware. We definitely want to have reoccurring prices. I can give you the Stripe key so that you can create reoccurring prices for this project. Let's do this correct. Are you ready for the key? Do you want to do it that way? All right, so I'll just give it the key here. All right, so now I noticed that it's creating a constants file, but I had wanted it to use the database to store the information about the subscription. So I'm a little bit curious about this. So I'm just going to break out of this real quick. I'm a bit curious what that constants file is for. We had originally talked about storing all of the subscriptions within the Supabase database and creating the tables needed to do that. Is there a specific reason why you're using a constants file instead of the database itself? Great question. You're absolutely right to ask. The constants file serves as a different purpose than the database tables. So the constants file's purpose. So this is where it's good to just understand what it's building for you. And if you're ever at a spot where you don't understand, take some time to learn. The constants file purpose is static configuration for displaying static configuration for displaying plans on the front end, for front-end rendering, features, definitions, UI logic, database tables purpose, dynamic user data, which specific user has which subscription, Stripe sync data, real-time status, how they work together. So the constants file is for what plans exist, and then it's using the database for what subscriptions a user actually has. So it's suggesting that we use the constants file, and it's saying that it's more complex and usually overkill for most SaaS applications. Is it really all that much more complicated to just use the database to store which subscriptions the user has the availability for? This is also a SaaS framework that is going to be configurable, should be easy to update. So I think in this case, storing everything in the database makes a lot more sense. And I don't think it's really all that much more complicated. Can you please think critically about this and let me know if I'm wrong? So you're absolutely right. I was being overly simplistic. Let me think through this critically. So why database is better? So now it's asking, should I redesign the schema to include products, prices, and features? So now this is where you need to be careful, because features itself are not something that are integrated with Stripe. We really only need to include in the database the stuff that Stripe needs. So features is something that we can just add to the page itself on the subscriptions page. So then it's asking, should I redesign the schema to include products, prices, and features table that sync with Stripe? All right, so let's be careful here. So features have nothing to do with Stripe. So we need to be careful that we're only designing the tables needed. And we don't need to sync back and forth. We just want to have the information inside of our database so that we can build and render the pages as needed, and the framework and the SaaS framework can function as planned. We don't need to sync them back and forth. That can be done manually very easily. And then in terms of the features, I don't think that has anything to do with Stripe at all. So let's make sure we're building something simple. Take a second to think about how we should do this. And then I'm going to jump back into plan mode. Now, the tendency is to just want to push forward and not have to think about any of this stuff. It's important to make sure that you're going about this in a way that makes sense and is simple, because the AI will tend to take you down different paths than you might not have been expecting. So it looks like it might have updated products, prices, features, and subscriptions. So these are the database tables it's going to create in Supabase, and then it's going to go ahead and put in some initial data. So let's go ahead and move forward. All right, so now it's trying to use the MCP to create our tables. I'm going to go ahead and say you have permission and you don't need to ask again. So now if I jump over to Supabase, we should see that we have some tables here in the database: features, prices, subscriptions, and products. All right, so now it wants to just double check that the data is there. Now I'm noticing here that it's creating a test suite with Playwright. It might be a little bit overkill. We'll go ahead, and I'm just curious to see what it comes up with. Well, let's do this. I'm going to just check out how things are going. If I come back to the SaaS itself, does it actually load? And if I go to subscription. I believe that was the URL that we had. So it's been sitting here for just a second. I'm gonna go ahead and escape out. Can you let me know exactly where we're at? It looks like you might be trying to create some Playwright tests using the MCP. I'd like to understand where we are and if there's any manual testing that we can take a quick look at just to see progress. And then from there, we can decide what to do with the Playwright MCP. Then I'm going to turn off auto accept. So it's going to give us a quick update. All right, so it's built out the database, the API routes. It says it built out the front end subscriptions page. So we can take a look at this here. I'm going to jump back here and just stop the previous run and then rerun the site. Sometimes you have to clear the cache, but we'll just see if we need to do that. Put in the subscriptions page. All right, so we're getting an issue. All right, so I'm going to copy this issue, come back to Visual Studio, paste that in here. Looks like I had an error. Can you go ahead and just make sure that all the cache is cleared and you've rebuilt everything and you take a look at this error and then we'll go ahead and test it again. So next what it's going to do is it's just going to clear the cache for Next.js and then run the build to make sure everything loads properly before we test it again. All right, so it had another error. So it's going to go ahead and just start to fix these items for us. That way we don't have to go through the pain of starting it over and over again over here on our own. Go ahead and let it fix all these bugs. Auto accept, let it rerun the build. All right, so we're still having some additional errors. We'll go ahead and fix those. All right, so these are the little things that I like to look out for. It just went ahead and disabled something here so that we could test. And I'm just going to back out and just ask. So basically I noticed that it turned off something that it uses to ensure quality. And so when you see that type of thing, just question it. And then it basically said, you're right to question that. Disabling this was a lazy approach and not a good practice. So we're back on track now. And now it's running npm run dev, but I didn't see it actually create the build yet. I didn't actually see you correct the build before you ran npm dev. Is that an oversight or something that's not needed? All right, so let's run the build. So it's just finding one more issue to fix. All right, so it has the build is working. So we're gonna go ahead and just run it and see how it's doing. It's noticing that I'm already running the app on port 3000. So it just started it on 3001. That's typical. You just want to be careful about that. We'll fix that in just a minute. See if the subscriptions load. All right, there we go. Cool. So we got free, enterprise, and pro. Definitely some styling to do here, and probably we want to be able to sort that properly, but it looks like initially we have this coming up properly. All right, so from here, it's asking us to sign in to subscribe. So I haven't actually signed in. Definitely some thought around navigation that we'll need to do. I'm going to go ahead and just sign in first of all, just to see something here. Then we'll go back to the subscriptions page now that we're logged in. So free is the default plan, and then we have enterprise. So it seems to be working. I'm just going to jump back to Visual Studio here. So I did a quick test. I'm going to go ahead and have it use the Playwright MCP, and I'm going to go ahead and give it the username and password. So I'm going to grab this here. Can you go ahead and do some basic testing since you know better what you built and what pages are where? I'll go ahead and give you a user that already exists. I'll give you the username, email, and the password. I'm just really curious to see how well this works. So here it's just trying to use curl. Sometimes it does this. It's not using the Playwright MCP. Can you use the Playwright MCP to test, not just curl? I'm going to move this over just a bit just so we can see everything that's happening. So it's just asking for permission to be able to autofill these things in. In general, a lot of the times you're just going to want to give it permission to do whatever it's trying to do and then give it permission for the next time. Otherwise, it just keeps asking you over and over again. It's going to subscribe to the pro plan. See if that works. I'm going to copy this. Failed to start checkout process. Looks like it's able to handle that on its own. It looks like it doesn't have the API key in the local, so it never filled out any of this information that it needs. Perfect, I found the issue, correct. Yes, of course, it's not really finished until we've tested this out, so you need to put in all of the environment variables that we need, and if you need any from me, let me know, and let me know when we can actually test the entire system. Sometimes AI is funny. It's basically telling us that it wasn't able to test everything, and it's telling us it's done as well and wondering if we really want to test everything. So it's asking for my Supabase credentials, but that's already in there and it needs the Stripe publishable key. So Supabase is already connected and working in the env local. You might want to just check and make sure what we already have there. Like you said, you already have the Stripe key. So now let me get you the Stripe publishable key. Grab this, drop that in there. Let me know if you need anything else. All right, I'm gonna just stop it. It's having the issue again with port 3000. So I'm gonna just kill this other version I had. I killed the other version of Next.js that was running on 3000. You can go ahead and use it now. All right, so looking at the local env variable, it does look like it has everything in here now. So now here we have the Playwright window open. Now, one thing I'm curious about is when it gets to the credit card spot, will it know what to put there. All right, so it didn't attempt to put in any credit card information here. I noticed you didn't actually try to put in a test credit card. I am in test mode, so you should be able to do that. Does the documentation in Stripe provide any information around what you should use for a test card and expiration date and CVC? All right, so it's going to put in the card information. Just go ahead and not save my information for faster checkout later on, so we can get past that one spot. Now, I surely could test this, but I'm just curious to see how well the MCPs are able to navigate through these testing scenarios. So it unchecked it, see if it subscribes, processing, subscription successful. Your plan is now active. Awesome. Okay, now I'm noticing that it's still showing the free plan, even though we subscribed. While this is working, I'm going to jump over to Stripe and let's just look at the transactions. So we have one here, subscription created. Perfect. And then let's jump over to Supabase, check out the tables. So then we have features, prices, products, and subscriptions. Notice that there's no subscription for the one we just created. Okay, so that's probably why the front end is not working correctly. All right, so we're getting there. One thing I noticed is the subscription is properly created inside of Stripe. However, I did notice that when we came back to the subscription plans page, it's still on the free plan, and there was nothing added to the database that shows us that the plan has switched to Pro. And you can see on the Playwright page that it's still showing the free plan as the current plan. So a little bit of debugging to do on as to why it didn't save that subscription to our Supabase database after it was completed. I'm actually going to flip into plan mode. So you're absolutely right. The payment went through, but our hook system didn't create anything. So let's see. So it looks like there might be a webhook that's missing. So basically what it's trying to say is that because we're running this locally, Stripe wasn't able to successfully initiate the webhook back to our server, but we do need to test this to make sure it's okay. So basically it wants to install the Stripe CLI, which probably is best practice, but it did give us an alternate approach where it can just call the webhook for us. But I think we should probably use the CLI. So I'm going to go ahead with the plan and install the CLI. I'm just curious as well. So it's going to automatically install that for us. So first thing that needs to happen is we just need to log in using the tool. All right, wants to rerun the dev site, let it start it. I'm approving these one by one just because I'm in uncharted territory learning as I go. So I want to see each command. So now it's going to test that webhook. And just so you understand, what ends up happening is that we are communicating back and forth with Stripe. Right? So normally your website is on the public internet and Stripe is able to access it. In this case, because we're on our local computer, when Stripe is trying to send stuff back to our local computer, it's not able to because you have a modem in the way and there's really no way to get in touch with your local. So we're setting up a workaround to do that using the Stripe integration command line tool. So now it's going to go through the process again. It's going to subscribe. Let's see if it unchecks this time. Trying to do a quick snapshot of the current page. It auto unchecked that. Now it's processing. Subscription successful. So it looks like the payment was successful and the webhooks are now being received. Most are returning 200, but it did get one with a 500. So now it's just investigating the error. It sees 2 issues. So now it's trying to fix those payment issues, seeing some database issues. So it's going ahead and fixing those. So it's just working through issues that it's seeing on its own. All right. So it says it's fixed. Just going to go back to port 3000 where we have our subscriptions. I believe this should take us to Stripe itself. Manage subscriptions, failed to create portal sessions. So that's an issue. Let's try to go through this process here. Subscribe to the enterprise. You already have an active subscription. Okay, so we have this problem here, manage subscription. I went to manage subscription in my own session. And when I did so, let me grab the error. I got this error. Feel free to test in Playwright MCP if you need to. Otherwise, if you have enough information, go ahead and fix that. All right, so now it sees the issue. So it looks like it was just testing with the fake customer ID and that's the actual issue. So now it's deleting things and checks the box. All right, so it's still continuing to debug the various issues. So it's still having an issue with the row level security in Supabase. So it's figuring out it's just using different roles that it should be using. So now it's going to be able to use the service role instead of it actually being a user. Okay, we're just giving access to Stripe to use the command line. This is actually pretty cool, this command line tool for Stripe. It essentially allows us to facilitate this communication I was talking about here for us. So it's able to simulate what's happening here. So now we have the subscription there. So now it's getting back to the manage subscription button. If you remember, we were trying to fix that, but it had to do some other work to get that ready to fix. And so now we're back here and we're at the same spot. So I wanted to log into Stripe, but now it's going to try to use the MCP. Go ahead and use the MCP. And if that doesn't work, then let me know what you need configured inside of the Stripe portal, and I'll do that for you. All right, so now we have the instructions on setting up the portal. So I'm just going to grab these, follow the instructions. All right, so I see a few things here: invoices, invoice history, customer information, payment methods, cancellations, subscriptions. So it told us to leave this off, business information. So now there's a couple of questions I have. It says, should we activate the test link? And do we want a redirect link? It looks like most of that is already set up. One question I do have is that it mentioned, should we activate a test link? And do we want to set up a redirect link? So this looks like it was already somewhat set up. So I'm not sure exactly what you're requiring me to do here and what the purpose was. So it looked like that might not be something that we even really need to worry about right now. So it mentioned that I haven't maybe saved this. So I'm just going to come back to the top and just save the changes, see if that does anything. Activate test link. So now this is a situation where it's starting to just suggest things and try things. When it seems like the AI is just starting to guess, I tell it to make sure to read the documentation and really to look and see if there's anything that it can find online. Can you go ahead and just use the documentation or the community support and try to figure out and make sure you know what you're doing versus just trying different things? Let's go ahead and do that and come up with a plan. So I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to jump back to plan mode. All right, so based on the research, I have a clear understanding what the issue is, root cause, no configuration provided in your test mode default configuration, because the Stripe customer portal requires an active save configuration simply by visiting the page. Okay, so I did save it, so I'll let it know that I did save it. So I'm going to jump out of the plan mode and just tell it that I did save it. Okay, just so you know, I did save it, so that was done. So what's the plan given that I have done that? So now here, be careful here, because it's saying, because you've already saved the configuration, let me present a plan for alternative approaches to fix the issue. So it's getting confused. I saved it after we went through all that information. It's starting to think that I saved it beforehand. No, you misunderstood me. I saved it after we started to investigate this issue, just a couple seconds ago, not before this issue first started. So given that I saved it after we started to have the issue, let's pick up again where we left off and what is the plan to finalize the setup. All right, so now it basically just wants to continue forward. So let's go. So it's going to automatically navigate back. All right, cool. So now we can navigate and manage this subscription. Perfect. And we can modify the billing, it looks like. Now, one thing it did mention back here was that it wouldn't allow me to actually change subscriptions. So I am going to take note of that and just ask later how difficult that is. They should still obviously be able to cancel it and resubscribe. So problem solved. The customer portal is now fully functional. Here's what we achieved. Can you use the Playwright MCP to also cancel the subscription on the page you're currently on, just to make sure that that's working and that it reflects in the SaaS application that it was canceled? So it wants to think that it's done, even though it hasn't really tested the cancellation yet. And now part of the reason why I'm using the built-in Stripe pages, as you see here, if you were to try to build all this out, it would be very difficult and there's a lot of compliance involved. All right, cool. So it actually shows that it's active, but cancels at the end of the period. So it was able to handle that gracefully. I'm just going to click through myself, manage here. So we could say don't cancel. Let's see what happens if I do that. I noticed in the billing portal, there is a button that says don't cancel subscription if I manage the subscription, because I still have an active subscription left. Should I expect that functionality to work? Do you want to test that in the Playwright MCP real quick? I'm on the manage subscription page. So I'm just continuing to explore these different features and making sure they work. So it looks like it worked on the Stripe side of things, but I wonder back in the portal if it's now subscribed again. So now it's just checking the logs to make sure everything worked. So it's waiting for it to go back to the application, but I don't see anything here that's going to do that automatically. It looks like it's just going to stay here. I don't get the sense that it's going to forward back automatically. You might want to just go back to the main page, subscription page, and see if everything was updated properly on its own using the Playwright MCP. All right, cool. So we can see that it is active again. Cool. Can you do me one favor and investigate the technical difficulty and the work involved to allow switching plans? It looks like the possibility could happen on the Stripe side of things, which might be more simple, I assume. I'm assuming that we could probably also do it from the actual SaaS interface as well, but I'm not familiar with the most simple way to set that up. Again, we want to keep this as simple as possible, Can you go ahead and review the documentation and look up the best practices for keeping this as simple as possible and suggest a plan forward? Now, before I do this, one thing I am going to do is I'm going to jump back to the terminal here. I'm just going to do a git status, and I'm going to go ahead and git add everything to this project. Although I'm noticing that I shouldn't have included the Claude and the Playwright MCP into the GitHub repository. So I'm going to do a git status. We're going to see all those files in there. So I need to reset these folders here. So I'm going to do git reset dot Claude and git reset dot Playwright dot MCP. Git status. All right, so now we move those back. So now one thing I want to do is just add those to the git ignore so we don't do that the next time. Git ignore, and we will add dot Claude and dot Playwright. That way we won't accidentally do that next time. Save, git status, Playwright dash MCP. Now when we do a git status, they won't even show up. And then we'll git add the .git ignore. And I'm just doing this now because I don't want to take this next step with a bunch of code that's working and mess it up. So git commit added Stripe integration. So now that that's committed, now I'll go ahead and run this. And then I'm going to go ahead and move it into plan mode because I realized it was an auto accept. All right, so it's got a plan here. Based on my research, there are two main approaches. Option one, Stripe Customer Portal, simplest recommended. You just enable the switch plans feature in your existing portal. Zero code changes. Stripe handles the entire UI. So we just need to turn it on. Current status, your webhook handler already processes updated events. So it should work. So recommended approach, just start with option one. All right, so we'll go ahead and let it move forward with that. Based off of what I understand, I'm going to be the one that has to do that. So it's trying to do that again. I'm just going to tell it I'll make that change. I'll make the change in the customer portal. You can just do the testing with the Playwright MCP. All right, so while that's chugging along, I'll go over to the customer portal here, and we saw that subscriptions, customers can switch plans. So we'll turn that on and we'll save the changes. You must add at least one eligible product. So we have to actually add the products here. So we'll say enterprise and the pro plan. All right, so we'll save that. Okay, it's ready. So now what it's testing is to make sure it can work here. And then once they've changed it, that it should be in the new plan back in the actual SaaS framework. All right, so now that it's seen that it was able to select that, so now it needs to continue. So that's coming up with the plan here. So the remaining tasks are complete the plan change, verify the webhook, test the end-to-end flow, mark as complete. So let's go ahead and say yes. All right, so that looks like it works. And now it's just making sure that the webhook is set up correctly. And I'm noticing that it is not on the new plan yet. So noticing that the webhook did not correctly register the subscription change. So it's saying it's totally done, except there's a minor issue. So there's no front end caching as far as I know, and you're saying it's done, but it's not done. So can you figure out and do some research, check the logs, and then do some online research with the documentation to see what's going on? All right, so it sees the issue. So it just didn't update the product ID. So it looks like we were just missing a little bit of code. All right, so it's trying to test again. I wonder if it tries to go back to the other plan. Now, the one thing that the AI is looking for is it wants to make sure that it's on the pro plan, but it already was. So it's going to find that. So I might just walk through it myself and just double check. All right, so let's just go to the subscriptions and take a look. So now realistically, I should be able to go through this process, confirm. And now if I go to subscriptions, now we're on the right plan. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so one quick thing I want to do is I want to be able to control the sort order. Really should be free, pro, and enterprise. Can you please make it so in the Supabase database, we have a sort order? Because in reality, the subscriptions should be free, pro, and enterprise. And we should have an integer in the products, if that's the right table. Don't assume products. I'm just assuming that would be the table to put this in. But we need to be able to adjust that. Can you go ahead and add that column and then update the product so that the free is first, then pro, and then enterprise? So that when I load the subscription page, they're in the right order. Also, one thing that I'm noticing here is that when we're subscribed, we probably shouldn't have this here, but let's do one thing at a time. I'm going to come back to that. So what's cool about this is that it's building this whole database. We haven't really looked at it much because it's just been doing this, but we have all of our features here that are associated with specific products product ID, and these are the different features. So the features, the prices, and the products here are all configured. And so now what we're trying to do is add a sort order here. And let's do a refresh. So I don't see a sort order added. Maybe it's on the prices. So we have one subscription, that's me. So it's interesting because it added some code here, and it said it added this to Supabase, products, sort order. Okay, so it did add it. So now we're just trying to get it to work. So I'm not seeing the order reflected here. Let's just double check in the database. Maybe they didn't put the order correctly. So we have Enterprise 3. Okay, so it's just not working. Looking at the subscription page, I do see in the database you have added the sort order column, but it is not being reflected on the subscription page itself. Feel free to use the Playwright MCP to take a quick screenshot if you need that, but do please confirm that it's correct before you say that it's done. So it's confirming everything is correct. It just seems like something in the front end code is not correct. So now it's kind of going off on a tangent. It's checking a bunch of different stuff. This has to be a front end rendering issue. It has nothing to do with APIs or anything like that. You display these in a specific order, and somehow in the front end code, I'm pretty sure that there is an issue there. So it said it found something. All right, there we go. So now the remaining issue that I'm seeing here is that if you're already subscribed, subscribing doesn't make sense. You would really want to manage subscription. So I'm going to fix that. When we are subscribed, when we have a plan, this button here should be manage subscription instead of subscribe. Okay, and now it's seeing that there's a different issue, but it doesn't understand that I did something manually. So you're seeing a discrepancy between the plans, but I did that behind the scenes. So that's working fine. The only remaining issue that I'm seeing right now is that when we are subscribed, and right now I'm looking at the Pro plan where it says subscribe, I believe that should really be managed subscription, since subscribing doesn't make sense here. We really want to manage the subscription. So when we are subscribed somewhere and we have a button that allows someone to change, actually, maybe it should be switch plan. So in the upper portion of the page where we have the subscription plans and we show the current plan and which plan it is and that it's active, and then the manage subscription button, that looks good. But in the three areas, if we are already subscribed, that button, instead of saying should subscribe, should be switch plans or switch to pro perhaps. What do you think? So I'm going to go back into plan mode. I see you're about to make a change, but let's confirm what it should be. Should it just say go pro or go enterprise depending, or should we make it more generic where we just say switch plans? And just to confirm, are you going to automatically just go to the manage subscription page as if they clicked the manage subscription button? Or is there something fancier that you're going to try to do? Let's keep it as simple as possible. So again, remind yourself to keep saying simple so that something crazy doesn't happen. And it's still in plan mode. So while that's happening, I'm going to definitely jump back to git, do a git status, git add, git commit, added, switch plans. So you're absolutely right to keep it simple. Let me clarify the current behavior. Current behavior is subscribe, plan, update subscribe button, change from subscribe to switch plan when user already has an active subscription, keep existing checkout flow, simple conditional text, switch plan, single line change. All right, let's just go with that. These are all things that we could modify and make better later. All right, so it says switch plans. Now let's just make sure it goes back to, so it didn't go back to the managed subscription. So the trick is that when we're unsubscribed, it should say subscribe. And when it says switch plan, it should just click the same thing and go to manage subscription. Okay, so you did change the button to switch plan, but there's an issue. So keep in mind, when we are unsubscribed, it should say subscribe, and then it should go through the subscription process. When we are already subscribed, it should say switch plan, which it does. But when it says switch plan, it should simply act as the manage subscription button like we have above. So the button should change functionality depending on what state we're in. If there's no subscription, we subscribe and we go through the subscribe process. If there is a subscription, then we say switch plan and we simulate going to the manage subscription page. Carefully look at the code as it is now and make sure that we have the button working in both situations properly, and keep it simple. This is a very simple solution. It just needs to do something different depending on where we are and have a current subscription or not. So again, when I get into these little situations kind of near the end, I like to keep going into plan mode, go a little slower just so we don't go down some rabbit hole and spend the next 4 hours fixing the most simple thing that we did. All right, so go ahead and read the plan. So trying to make an on-click handler. Does it really need to be dynamic with JavaScript? It sounds like the solution you're trying to come up with is an on-click JavaScript style correction. Is that something that we have to do? That seems a little bit more hacky to me than just directing to the proper page and setting the page up properly. Can we do it the correct way in a simple way without opening up potential hacks? Or let me know if you think that this is an actual good solution based off of your experience and what and how the community does this. Can you do a quick search in the documentation or in the community as well, just to back up how we're doing this? So basically they were going to add some code here that detected it. So when I clicked on it, it would do one or the other. But realistically, I think that the button should be programmed correctly based off of the situation and not some sort of code that's added after the fact. So again, that's why I said, hey, go look and see what the community does. So after researching Stripe's official documentation, Stripe's official best practices, checkout versus, so this is what I wanted it to do. So it's saying this is not a hack. I didn't necessarily think going to the right page was a hack. I thought maybe the way it was doing with the on click. So I'm just going to confirm that. I do this often because I'm just trying to learn. I didn't think sending it to different pages was a hack. I was just wondering if the on click specifically, using that as the solution to direct to the right page, is a hack, as opposed to just making sure that the button goes to the right place. Or is that how it's already done? I'm not trying to overcomplicate things, just trying to make sure that we are doing it the right way. Now, also, you got to be careful here too. I said wasn't a hack and it says was a hack. Also, when you're dictating, make sure that it's dictating correctly. It actually made a mistake there, but let's just see how it handled this. All right, got it. So this is not a hack. This is actually standard practice. Now, if you had been doing this, you might not have stopped here. I'm stopping here because there are other platforms where this is kind of a hack, but it sounds like in React, this is normal. But I don't mind stopping things just to learn and investigate things that I'm not sure about. All right, let's go ahead with the simple conditional on click approach. All right, so now if I click switch plan, it should basically take me to manage subscription. Perfect. Okay, that worked great. Can you go ahead and just clear out any active subscriptions this current user has so that we could make sure that the button now says subscribe instead of manage subscription? So it's going to go into Supabase. Well, it looks like actually it's going to go to Stripe first. I don't know that we have to do it in Stripe, but so realistically, I think where we need to cancel this is inside of our Supabase database, not necessarily in Stripe. Actually, I was thinking, since we're talking about the SaaS application I'm talking about in Supabase, I believe if we cleared the subscription out there, that would send us back to where it says subscribe, no? So basically, I'm talking about coming here to Supabase into these subscriptions here. And it looks like I just cleared it out. So now, if we come back to our subscriptions, and now it's back to subscribe. And if I click subscribe, it should take me to the subscribe page. Perfect. Now, if you want to get access to this SaaS framework without having to vibe code everything from scratch, make sure to jump into the Vibe and Coders community. You'll find the framework inside the classroom. We've got support calls where you can get help and a networking call on Friday. And there's an engaged group of startup entrepreneurs that you can find in there, all working together on their new company. I'd love to see you inside the community. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.